Hello, listeners. If you can hear and see this, it means you're breathing and you're alive. Well done. If you're new here, consider subscribing. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's begin. It all started with the orientation packet, a plain manila folder handed to me by a man whose name I never learned on my first day at the facility. The packet was thin, just a few sheets of paper, but the contents were anything but ordinary. I was a materials scientist, recruited from a quiet university lab for my work on amorphous solids, thinking I was going to be studying exotic alloys or perhaps meteorite fragments. The reality I would learn was a different kind of physics altogether. The rules were not listed under any official heading, no bold font or numbered decrees. They were simply there, sandwiched between the fire safety protocols and the non-disclosure agreement addendums, written in the same calm, bureaucratic tone as the rest. It gave the whole thing a surreal quality, like reading instructions for assembling a bookshelf that casually mentioned not to acknowledge the whispering from the box of screws. Rule 1. The hallways are a consistent shade of gray. If you perceive any other color, including but not limited to blue, red, or a particularly vivid beige, do not investigate. Proceed directly to the nearest checkpoint and report for a Level 2 sensory debrief. Do not discuss the color with colleagues en route. I remember almost laughing at that one, thinking it was some bizarre psychological test for new hires, a way to see who would take the strange in stride. I didn't laugh for long. My first week was a blur of badges, security scans, and laboratories that were both incredibly advanced and strangely mundane. My lab was in Sector 7, a subsurface level accessible by an elevator that required both a keycard and a rhythmic tap sequence on the keypad, a pattern that changed every Tuesday and Friday. The work was fascinating, analyzing a sliver of a material that defied crystal structure, a metal that was cold to the touch but registered no temperature on any instrument. I was engrossed, the strange rules fading to background noise. Then, on a Thursday, I saw the beige. It was in hallway C12, a main artery to the cafeteria. The walls were, as always, a dull industrial gray. But about 50 feet ahead, near a junction, a patch of the wall, about the size of a dinner plate, was undeniably warmly beige. It wasn't a stain or a light effect. It looked like someone had taken a sample of cream-colored paint and carefully applied it to the steel paneling. I stopped walking, my lunch tray suddenly heavy in my hands. My scientific mind immediately tried to rationalize it. A prank, a cleaning chemical reaction, a trick of the specific spectrum of the overhead LEDs. But the rule echoed in my head. Do not investigate. I stood there, frozen, as a pair of technicians walked past me, chatting about a Dodgers game. They walked right by the beige patch without a glance, their conversation never faltering. To them, it wasn't there. That was the moment the first real chill went through me, a cold comprehension that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I forced my legs to move, walking not toward the beige but veering sharply left toward a small maintenance checkpoint I remembered from the map. The guard there, a woman with a bored expression, looked up as I approached. Before I could speak, she slid a form across the counter. Sensory discrepancy, she asked, her voice flat. I nodded, my throat dry. She pointed to a door beside her station. Debrief room 3. They'll be with you shortly. The debrief was not what I expected. There was no interrogation, no accusation. A man in a lab coat, Dr. Archer, had me sit in a plain room and describe exactly what I saw. He recorded my statement, asked me to specify the shade, the exact location, and whether I felt any other sensory anomalies. A smell, a sound, a change in air pressure. He was polite, professional, and utterly closed off. When I finished, he nodded, made a note, and said, Thank you. You may return to your duties. Avoid hallway C12 for the remainder of the day." No explanation was offered. As I left, I saw a two-man team in gray coveralls heading down the hall towards C12, carrying not paint cans, but a small, sealed case that hummed faintly. I didn't go to the cafeteria that day. Rule 2. The custodial staff works from midnight to 4, and they are to be acknowledged with a nod if eye contact is made, but not spoken to. If you encounter a custodian outside of this window, do not look at them. Proceed to your destination by the most direct route, even if it means passing within close proximity. Do not run. This rule seemed easier to follow. I was a day shift researcher. My overlap with the night custodians was minimal. I'd see them sometimes during late evenings, pushing their silent carts, mopping floors with a pungent, lemony cleaner. They were a uniform group, men and women of varying ages, all with the same vacant, placid expression. I gave my nods, they sometimes nodded back, and that was that. The incident happened about a month after the beige episode. I was working late, trying to reconcile some anomalous data from the amorphous sample. The lab was silent except for the hum of a spectrometer. Frustrated, I decided to take a walk to the sector's break room for coffee. The corridor lights were dimmed for night cycle, casting long pools of shadow. As I rounded a corner, I saw him. A custodian, dressed in the standard blue-gray uniform, was polishing the already gleaming surface of a fire extinguisher case. His motions were slow, meticulous. I glanced at my watch. It was 10:47 p.m. The rule flashed in my mind. If you encounter a custodian outside of this window, do not look at them. But I already had. Our eyes met. His were not vacant. They were intensely focused, a deep, liquid brown that seemed to drink in the dim light. He didn't look away. He stopped polishing and simply stared. The rule said not to look, but breaking contact felt suddenly dangerous, like turning your back on a predator. My heart began a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. "Do not run," the rule stated. I forced my head down, breaking the gaze, and focused on the scuffed toes of my own shoes. I walked forward, my path taking me within 3 feet of him. The air grew cold, and the smell wasn't lemony cleaner, but something old and dry, like dust from a long-sealed attic. I could feel his eyes on the side of my face. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, my muscles tense with the effort of not bolting. I didn't hear him move. I didn't hear a breath. I walked all the way to the break room, the feeling of that gaze clinging to me like a cobweb. When I dared to glance back, the hallway was empty, the fire extinguisher case dull and unpolished. I never worked past 8 p.m. again. Rule 3. All personal digital devices are to be left in Locker 17, Sector 1, upon entry. Facility-issued chronometers are provided at each workstation. If your issued chronometer ever displays a time containing triple repeating digits, for example, 1111 or 333, you are to immediately cease all activity, close your eyes, and count backwards from 100 by sevens. Do not open your eyes until you hear the sound of a single, distinct hand clap. This rule was the one that frayed my nerves the most, because it was so specific, so utterly nonsensical. The chronometers were old-fashioned analog watches with a soft white face and black numerals. They were surprisingly heavy. I wore mine, reluctantly, checking it constantly. Weeks passed without incident. Then, one afternoon during a tedious calibration process, I looked at my wrist. The watch read 111. The second hand was sweeping smoothly, nearing the 12. As it clicked into place, the time became 111 and 1 second. 1, 1, 1. Triple repeating digits. A jolt of pure, undiluted adrenaline shot through me. I dropped the calibration tool I was holding. It clattered on the lab bench, but the sound seemed distant. I squeezed my eyes shut, plunging myself into darkness. My mind, trained for precision, seized up, counting backwards from 100 by sevens. 193. My internal voice was a frantic whisper. 86, 79. The numbers tangled. I lost my place, started over. 193, 86. The darkness behind my eyelids felt thick, pressurized. I was aware of the lab around me, the familiar hum of machines, but it felt wrong, like the sounds were coming from another room. 79, 72. I focused on the numbers, a lifeline in the void. 65, 58. Was it getting colder? I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. 51, 44. A sound, not a hand clap. A soft, shuffling step, like something dragging lightly across the linoleum floor. It was close. 37:30. Don't open your eyes. The rule was absolute. The shuffling circled me. I could feel a presence, a displacement of air that carried that same dry, attic smell from the hallway. 23:16. The shuffling stopped right in front of me. I held my breath. 9:2. I finished the count. Silence. Utter, profound silence. The omnipresent hum of the facility was gone. There was only the sound of blood in my head and the feeling of something standing inches from my face. Panic clawed at my throat. The rule said not to open my eyes until the hand clap. What if the hand clap never came? What if I was stuck here, in this silent darkness, with that presence, forever? Then, a sound. Not from in front of me, but from my left, near the door. A single, crisp, impossibly loud clap of hands. The normal hum of the facility rushed back in. I gasped, my eyes flying open. The lab was empty. My calibration tool was on the floor where I dropped it. My chronometer read 1:12 and 15 seconds. Less than a minute had passed. My hands were trembling so badly I had to sit down. I never found out who clapped. Rule 4. The vending machines in Sector 4's break room are stocked with standard snacks and beverages. If you observe an item that is not listed on the selection panel, you may purchase it. You must consume the entire item in the break room. Do not share it. Do not leave any portion uneaten. Do not discuss the taste with anyone. After the chronometer incident, I became hyper-observant, a raw nerve in a lab coat. I avoided hallway C12. I left every day at 5 p.m. sharp. I checked my watch obsessively. The vending machine rule seemed almost benign by comparison. I rarely went to Sector 4, but one day I was there for a cross-departmental meeting. During a break, craving a chocolate bar, I approached a machine. The selections were the usual: chips, candy, pastries. I inserted my coins and pressed the code for a peanut butter cup. The coil spun, but the item that thudded into the tray was not in a familiar wrapper. It was a small, white box, unmarked, about the size of a deck of cards. There was no brand, no ingredients, nothing. I looked at the selection panel. Where the peanut butter cup icon had been, there was now a simple white square. No description, no price. Just a white square. My mouth went dry. I could have walked away. The rule said you may purchase it. It was not a command. But a morbid, exhausted curiosity had taken root in me. I was tired of being afraid of beige walls and silent janitors and unseen hand clappers. I bent down and retrieved the box. It was light. I opened the flap. Inside, on a bed of plain white tissue paper, was a pastry. It looked like a small, perfect Danish, glazed a honey gold, with a swirl of red filling in the center. It smelled incredible, like fresh berries and baked butter and something else, a spice I couldn't name. I took it to a small table in the corner of the empty break room. The rule was clear: consume the entire item. Do not leave any portion uneaten. I took a bite. The flavor was intense, overwhelming in its sweetness and complexity. The pastry melted on my tongue, the red filling bursting with a tartness that perfectly cut the sugar. It was, without question, the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. A wave of pure, unadulterated pleasure washed over me, a physical warmth that started in my stomach and radiated outward, loosening the knots of tension in my shoulders, blurring the sharp edges of my constant anxiety. For the first time in months, I felt good. No, I felt fantastic. Euphoric. I ate the rest slowly, savoring every crumb, licking the sticky glaze from my fingers. When it was gone, I felt a profound sense of loss. I sat there for a long time, basking in the afterglow. The feeling faded after an hour or so, leaving me with just the memory of the taste and that incredible sensation of well-being. I never saw the white square on the vending machine panel again. I went back to Sector 4 the next day, inserted my coins, and pressed the same code. A regular peanut butter cup fell out. I didn't eat it. Rule 5. Your assigned quarters are your sanctuary. The door locks from the inside only. You will hear knocking at night. It may be gentle and persuasive, or it may be loud and urgent. You are never to acknowledge the knocking in any way. Do not call out, do not approach the door, do not place any object against it. Remain in bed until the knocking ceases. If the knocking changes to a rhythmic scratching sound, implement Protocol Lullaby. The rule did not elaborate on what Protocol Lullaby was. I had to look it up in the appended digital manual on my secure terminal. It was a simple instruction. Hum the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star continuously until the scratching stops. Do not use words. This was the rule that broke my sleep. My quarters were a small, comfortable studio apartment deep within the facility's residential wing. Soundproofed, I was told. But the first night I heard the knocking, I understood that soundproofing meant nothing here. It started around 2 a.m., a soft, almost polite tap, tap, tap on my door. It sounded exactly like a colleague stopping by for a late-night chat. My first instinct was to call out, "Who is it?" But the rule was ironclad. I lay frozen in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The knocking continued, patient, persistent. It went on for 20 minutes. Then it stopped. Silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next night, it was louder, a firm, demanding knock. Bang, 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 like someone was using the heel of their hand. I pulled the blanket over my head, my hands clenched into fists. The banging shook the door in its frame. It lasted for what felt like an hour. Then, silence. The third night, it was the scratching. A long, slow, deliberate drag of something sharp and hard down the length of my door, from top to bottom. The sound set my teeth on edge, a physical violation of my space. I remembered Protocol Lullaby. I began to hum, my voice shaky and thin in the dark room. I hummed the simple melody of the children's song. The scratching paused. Then it resumed, faster now, matching the rhythm of my humming, a grotesque accompaniment. I kept humming, my eyes squeezed shut, tears of fear and frustration leaking from the corners. I hummed until my throat was raw. After an eternity, the scratching stopped. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The knocking came irregularly after that, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, sometimes turning to scratching. I always followed the rules. I never acknowledged it. I hummed when I had to. I existed in a state of perpetual, low-grade exhaustion, a ghost in a lab coat, jumping at shadows and flinching at the sound of my own watch ticking. The final rule was not in the packet. It was delivered to me personally by Dr. Archer, the man from the sensory debrief, 6 months into my tenure. He came to my lab, his expression graver than before. He handed me a single sheet of paper. Rule 6. You have been exposed. Your perception has been altered. You will begin to see them. They are not hostile, but they are curious. Do not interact. Do not attempt to photograph or record them by any means. If one makes direct eye contact with you for longer than 3 seconds, report to Medical Wing Delta for immediate neural stabilization. There is no cure for prolonged exposure, only management. Do not ask what they are. I stared at the paper, then at Archer. What does this mean? I asked, my voice hollow. He just shook his head, a gesture of profound weariness. It means the rules are no longer just precautions. They are now your lifeline. Good luck. He left. The them started appearing 2 days later. At first, it was just glimpses in my peripheral vision. A tall, spindly shape standing motionless at the end of a corridor, its outline blurry like a heat shimmer. When I turned my head, it was gone. Then I saw one in my lab. I was adjusting an electron microscope when I felt that familiar dry, cold air. I looked up. It was standing in the corner, near a storage cabinet. It was tall, perhaps 7 feet, and impossibly thin. Its body seemed to be composed of layered shadows, a darkness that drank the light. It had no discernible features, no face, just a suggestion of a head that tapered to a point. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. I remembered the rule: do not interact. I looked back down at my microscope, my hands trembling so violently I couldn't operate the controls. I focused on my breathing, on the mundane task in front of me. When I looked up 10 minutes later, it was gone. They appeared more frequently after that, sometimes in hallways, sometimes in the cafeteria, standing silently among the oblivious staff. I was the only one who saw them. I learned to look through them, to pretend they were not there. It was the most mentally exhausting thing I have ever done. The breaking point came during a routine material stress test. I was alone in a testing chamber, monitoring readouts. A pressure plate was slowly compressing a sample of the strange metal. I felt the temperature drop. I didn't need to look. I knew one was in the room with me. I kept my eyes on the screen. The numbers began to fluctuate erratically. Not because of the sample, but because the machine itself was glitching, its lights flickering. A low, resonant hum filled the room, a sound that vibrated in my bones. From the corner of my eye, I saw it approach. It glided, rather than walked, its shadow form drifting across the floor until it was standing directly beside me. Looking over my shoulder at the monitor, the dry smell was overwhelming. I held my breath, my entire body rigid. Then, slowly, it turned its featureless head toward me. I could feel its attention, a palpable force. Against every instinct, I kept my gaze locked on the flickering screen. But then, the screen went black. In its reflective surface, I saw the dim reflection. My own pale, terrified face, and behind me, the thing. And in the darkness where its face should be, I saw 2 points of soft, blue light. They were not eyes. They were something else. And they were looking directly at my reflection. The 3-second rule. I broke. I shoved myself away from the console, the chair screeching on the floor, and ran for the door. I didn't look back. I ran through the corridors, past startled colleagues, past the gray walls that might have been beige or blue or red for all I cared. I ran to Medical Wing Delta. The staff there, moving with a grim efficiency I had never seen before, took me without a word. They placed me in a chair that looked like a dentist's chair, but made of a cold, black material. They attached nodes to my temples, my wrists. A clear visor was lowered over my eyes. Neural stabilization is painful, a nurse said, her voice devoid of empathy. It will feel like your thoughts are being combed with wire. Do not resist. She was not exaggerating. When they activated the machine, it was as if a white-hot iron was being dragged through the folds of my brain. I saw flashes, the beige wall, the custodian's eyes, the white pastry, the scratching at my door, the blue points of light, all jumbled together in a cacophony of terror. I screamed until my voice gave out. When it was over, I was drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably. The them were gone. I couldn't see them anymore. The world seemed flat, dull, washed of a certain layer of reality. Dr. Archer visited me in recovery. The stabilization is temporary, he said. It scrubs the recent perceptual data, but the exposure is cumulative. You'll see them again. Sooner each time. The intervals between stabilizations will shorten. Eventually, they won't work at all. What happens then? I whispered. He didn't answer. He just looked at me with an expression of pity that was worse than any fear. I left Area 51. It wasn't easy, but they let me go. There were more forms, more brutal debriefings, injections they said were memory dampeners that I know didn't work. I live in a small town now, far from the desert. I work in a library. The world is quiet, but I follow my own rules. I never look at a clock showing triple digits. I avoid beige-colored walls. I leave any room if a janitor enters. I never answer the door after dark. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I think I hear a faint, rhythmic scratching. Not on the door, inside the walls. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that I didn't really leave them behind. They're just waiting for the stabilization to wear off completely. They're curious, and they know I can almost see them again.